Great. So thank you everyone for joining the Learning Planet Festival. Oh my God, Diana, that is quite an introduction. There's a bat in your office. Very much, very much an environment session then. I hope you're all right. Wow. So clearly this is a good sign that we are a good omen that we are starting our session with. I am Radhika Iyengar. I am at the Center for Sustainable Development at the Climate School at Columbia University, and we will be showcasing a lot of Climate School's initiative with our network, which is the Climate Education for a Resilient Future Network, and our partners. The focus of today's session will be on teacher education on climate. We'll be also showcasing our work as the Eco Ambassadors Program with SN's SDGs Today and New Jersey Sea Grant, and also the disaster preparedness and climate resilience as a part of our network group. We'll share about the higher education component, which is Columbia University and its partners, and how we are trying to work on various different spheres on creating much more of a resilient earth. Our session for today is with Diana Burek. She is the Director of Education, New Jersey Sea Grant. She's accompanied with a bat today in her office, so maybe we'll have another co-presenter. Laurel Zima, she is the Assistant Director K-12 and Continuing Education Climate, Columbia Climate School, and is also the co-director of our network. Dr. Josh Vincenzo is the Assistant Director for Education and Training and Adjunct Assistant Professor at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, and we want to very much learn from his initiatives, given that disasters have become so prevalent and so common. Unfortunately, Mariam Rabi will be joining from SDGs Today. She is the Director of SDGs Today at the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And we are very lucky that we have these 4 panelists who will be sharing their work, who will also be showcasing how you can join this effort. So please feel free to ask questions. You can write it in the chat. We also have Laura Jones. She will be moderating the questions, and she's a part of our network. And please feel free to write in the chat your questions as well as keep it towards the end. Hopefully, we will not go beyond certain time so that we can get a lot of questions and discussions as we go along. So first, I'll ask Laurel to jump in and maybe say a few words about her work. And a question from my end is how has Climate School been able to reach out to the communities, and what are some of the key takeaways of the role of higher education institutions to impart climate education? So clearly you are the best person to answer this question, since you've been doing a lot of higher education and community related work. Over to you, Laurel.
Thanks, Radhika, and thank you for having me a part of this panel. Thanks everyone for joining us today. The Columbia Climate School, as you know, a part of Columbia University, has a mission to bring the scholarship and the education out into degree-seeking audiences. But what I find relatively unique and extremely important that the Climate School has this mission to also bring the scholarship of the university out into all audiences, including non-degree seeking audiences. So we have programs that are focused on K-12 students and teachers, both formal and informal educators, professional learners, lifelong learners. We really want to equip decision makers with the knowledge and tools to bring climate sustainability into their work. We work with executives of organizations and businesses, and essentially all climate leaders. We want to ensure that we are able to work with them so they can push these solutions forward. The Climate School's non-degree programs, as this is kind of called, is really focused on growing this greater engagement with broader audiences, with the goal to equip them with climate and sustainability knowledge and then apply that directly to their work. So we have a couple of different programs related to these different audiences. The first is the professional learning programs. So we are working with professional learners in various sectors to ensure that we're equipping them with this knowledge to really drive forward sustainability solutions. We are learning so much about the intersection of climate change in various sectors at the climate school. We have many centers and many incredible researchers that are doing this transdisciplinary work. But we also recognize that if we can't get this information outside of the academia bubble, then we're not going to really experience the change that needs to happen on the ground. So by providing stakeholders with these opportunities to join us for workshops, we're hoping that we can share how climate is going to impact their work, what they can do to mitigate these impacts, and also what solutions they can leverage to lower their own greenhouse gas emissions and push positive solutions forward. We also have programs for pre-college or high school students, both virtual and in-person opportunities. For the academic year, we have virtual workshops on Saturdays that are taking a deep dive into one particular climate or sustainability topic for 15 hours. Students join us from all over the world. It's an incredible opportunity for students to have discussions with folks that have different perspectives from them, which I think is really important, not just for them to learn outside of the classroom on these topics, but also to learn from each other. The in-person program is over the summer. It's called Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains. So it's a 2-week program where 6 different experts from the climate school join students to teach them about climate in a holistic way, so they have a really strong understanding of everything from the science of climate change and modeling to disasters, risk, resilience, policy, economics. But ultimately, what we're really trying to do is equip them with the skills to create their own climate action plans. So at the end of the program, they can bring these solutions back home and continue the work after the program's over. We are actually just wrapping up a National Science Foundation project called Research Experiences for Undergraduates and Teachers. The program ends at the end of March, but it's been an incredible opportunity to work with undergraduate students from other universities that may not have opportunities to do research in climate or sustainability topics, as well as K-12 teachers. And this audience is embedded in a research project over the summer. So they're working directly with PIs and labs or research teams to create a deliverable. For undergraduates, they're creating a scientific poster with the goal of presenting it at an academic conference. That extends, the reach and understanding of the work being done at the climate school, but also helps them continue on in their STEM career paths. And teachers help to create curricula around the research project so then they can bring it into the classroom. We have a Climate Live video series. I see I'm going a little out of order here, but the Climate Live video series is a 30-minute session monthly that highlights the work of one expert at the climate school in an effort to continuously bring this information outside of Columbia. And with the Climate Education for Resilient Future Earth Network, we have a couple of different goals. One of them is to be a part of a teacher and educator training this year. So we're working with New York City Public Schools and Teachers College to be a part of this professional development opportunity to reach over 500 New York City public school teachers to share about the curricula we've developed and some of the best practices that they can use in their own classrooms. And more broadly, this Earth Network that Radhika and I are co-directors of, the goal of it is to really bring together researchers and practitioners and educators and students as well from across the climate school and beyond to have a platform for us to share insights, identify gaps, and ways that we can fill the gaps with our work. And the goal is to ultimately co-develop and strengthen some of the current and future research projects or education projects that we're working on. So if this is something of interest to you, we definitely encourage you to reach out to us, and we'd love to have you join our network as well. Yeah, and I'm happy to take more questions at the end, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing at the climate school.
Thank you so much, Laurel. You've given us a wide scope of programs that we can engage with, so grateful for that. Next over to Josh, and if you can talk about the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, Josh, that will be wonderful to know more about your efforts in terms of education with the lens of education, and also what are some of the ways in which your center's been able to build community resilience? And if there's any examples that you would like to give, that will really help us to get some insights.
Sure, happy to do it, and an honor to be here with everyone this morning. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of NCDP, or the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, and then expand a little bit into the community resilience as well as the education side. So the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, we kind of wear two hats here at Columbia Climate School, one as a research center and then two as an academic department, which I'm sure many folks on the call in your institutions are used to also having to wear multiple hats. But for NCDP, we have a long history, over 2 decades of working on preparing capacities nationally, here domestically in the US, but also internationally, on how to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. So the mission is extremely broad. So we are also in various different settings when we look at building community resilience. So for us, we think of community resilience in the form of 3 gears. These 3 gears constantly turning tend to be an economic gear, a social gear, and a political gear. So in a blue sky day, as we call it in the disaster space, when we don't have a disaster on our doorstep, those gears are turning kind of as they would status quo, business as usual. Disasters, as we know, come in many forms, and we classify a disaster the second it harms people, property, environment. Will be a disruptor to those 3 gears and how they function together. So one of the things that we're very focused on is how do we take advantage of those blue sky days when we're not in the response of a disaster to prepare communities, all sectors of society, whole community, all of society approaches for the immediate impacts of disasters, the long-term recovery of disasters from various angles. So with that said, one of the key themes and one of the things that I want to put on people's radar, because I also want to make sure I'm able to share with the group here what we're thinking about as a higher education institution, given the increase in disasters frequency and magnitude around the world. And from an education standpoint, what are some of our priorities? So one of the first priorities I think that's very applicable and general would be really looking at all subjects for all hazards. So a hazard is essentially what we're thinking about before it becomes a disaster event. What's our community or people at risk of if this hazard were to become a disaster? And we know that we can't only rely on simply a scientific explanation of that hazard. There's the lived experience. There's our community assets. The community dynamics and demographics that we need to think about. So we're looking at disasters from all angles, from the built environment to the psychological components to the economics to the political science. So really bringing and democratizing disaster content in itself to be applicable to all different fields, all different disciplines, and especially for students that want to take interdisciplinary approaches to these solutions that are so impactful to their day to day. As I mentioned, disasters are kind of a living case study, so as much as in other fields and other subjects, sometimes we can rely on the textbooks, and in the disaster sciences, our textbooks are out of date each year. So how do we create these adaptive capacities for our students to, one, rely on some of the theoretical frameworks we have, but also be able to think about these challenges facing communities around the world very critically around how we design our programs, how do we design our policies, our funding mechanisms for disaster response and recovery. The other thing from an education standpoint that we like to instill in our department and in our research is really looking at climate education, disaster education as a continuum, and really a true case of lifelong learning. So going to Radhika's question around how do we foster community resilience in our work as a research center as well as an academic department, it's being as present as we can in the communities while also acknowledging our positionality as a higher education institution. So thinking about, how can we provide communities with resource? What can we do to make things open access or accessible to different groups so that they have the preparedness information, the empowerment information to make the decisions at the community level with or without us. The other thing that is just so pertinent is understanding that disasters is a very human experience. It's a very lived experience. So we have people of all ages, all backgrounds, all demographics going through these very disruptive experiences. So how, as educators, can we create that continuum or that trajectory where we can have these discussions around what's going on? How can we better prepare communities for the future? One, based, of course, in the literature and the science, but then really leaning into our role as educators and walking people through transformations and transformative learning on how to make sense of what's going on and set us on a trajectory of that's prepared for the complexity of what's ahead. So all that to say, I know disasters sometimes are a heavy topic to talk about. We're very optimistic in terms of the engagements that we're able to have with our stakeholders across those three gears in the economic sector, political sector, social sector. But very close to my work, it's also the pre-college students. Working with the middle schoolers, the high schoolers, to the professionals that are coming back later in their careers to come to the climate school for a master's degree, whatever it might be. It is just really a privilege to see the lifelong learning that occurs when it comes to the intersection of climate sustainability and, of course, the disaster disruption. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. I'll pass it to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Josh. Very good overview of what we can expect from academicians and some blend of like community work. So really, really powerful examples there. I'll hand over to Diana Burek, who has been really instrumental in shaping our summer work on with eco ambassadors, with our partners. And I just wanted to get a sense from her. She's been doing climate education, science education for a very long time. And I just wanted to ask her, based on your experience, what has been successful and what are some of the lessons learned that we can maybe utilize going forward and build strategies around community-based science education? Diana?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Radhika. Nice to see everyone here. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about Sea Grant, what Sea Grant is. In New Jersey, we're an affiliation of colleges and universities and other groups that are dedicated to advancing the knowledge and stewardship of marine and coastal environments. We're part of the National Sea Grant Program, which is a state-federal partnership program under NOAA that brings science together with communities for solutions that work. And there's a Sea Grant in every coastal and Great Lakes state, as well as Puerto Rico and Guam. And we're all working towards creating healthy coastal environments and economies. We do this by funding state-based research. And we take that information and we translate it for public use through extension work, education programs, and communications efforts. I'm the director of education, and I oversee the environmental literacy and workforce development efforts. And our program goals are to develop and foster an environmentally literate public and informed by a continuum of lifelong formal and informal engagement opportunities, as well as developing and fostering a diverse future workforce that's skilled in STEM careers. We meet our mission with the education program by offering programs such as outdoor experiential learning opportunities for students in grades K through 12, in-school and after-school programs that enhance student learning and supplement teachers' curricula, synchronous remote programs that engage students from far and near, Boy and Girl Scout programs that meet badge requirements with hands-on exploration, educator professional development that prepares teachers to teach subjects like climate change and marine debris in developmentally appropriate ways. Standards, we also develop standards aligned curriculum to meet ocean and climate science needs of New Jersey's formal educators. And we also offer internship opportunities. So we're not based in a university the way other Sea Grants are. In fact, in New Jersey, we're also a nonprofit organization. But we do partner with academic institutions and other organizations and community groups to create programs that inform the public, such as we have an ocean hazards, sharks versus rip currents, Jeopardy style presentation game that teaches people about rip current safety and swimming safely in the ocean. We engage youth in community action, like our work with Radhika and the Columbia Climate School on the Eco Ambassadors program. And we also, like I said, support New Jersey's K through 12 educators by teaching climate change. Because you may be aware that we have the distinction, New Jersey has the distinction of being the first state in the nation to require teachers to teach climate change throughout the grade bands and throughout the subjects. So we've been involved in climate change education for a number of years. We've been working, as I said, towards increasing environmental literacy. We're located here at Sandy Hook, Gateway National Recreation Area. So we've been doing this since about the 80s, the 1980s. And I can't say we've been teaching climate change, even though some of the EPA reports gave us a heads up in the 80s about climate change. However, there's always been a focus here at Sea Grant on experiential learning and creating curricula that's place-based and transferable to any local community. When we're developing curricula, we work with teachers. We survey them to determine their needs. We engage the funded scientists that we've provided funding for their work. We engage them, industry experts, our extension agents. We create extensive networks of collaborators that we can draw information from, and that helps to inform our lesson plan and activity and learning module development to support curricular needs. We also want to create learning experiences that are engaging and effective. Nobody, I don't know about you guys, but I can remember being young and being in science class, and it might have been a little boring. And so we're all about active learning. So some of the teaching strategies for teaching climate change that we've utilized, absolutely hands-on activities, where scientific concepts are combined with real-world applications. An example could be maybe an activity on the importance of dunes and in stabilizing beaches and preventing beach erosion during storms. Inquiry-based learning is another strategy that we use. It encourages exploration and curiosity alongside peers for kids to learn together. So another example of that could be an activity where the placement pattern of plants on dunes encourage dune stabilization, and the kids are working together, asking questions about, how they're going to place plants, let's say. We also use differentiation, adjusting instruction to meet students' needs, such as learning stations, visual models, manipulatives. We utilize group dynamics, how the students work together, that's taken into consideration. And that's applicable in a lot of our outdoor activities like seining and water quality testing. And we also, of course, look at student abilities, considering how well they understand concepts and how well they can work with the materials provided. So these are a lot of the strategies that we utilize when we're teaching climate change. And they've really been successful because we've been able to provide resources for teachers that really make the learning engaging and fun, but are effective in increasing student knowledge and understanding. The resources that we develop are available on our website for free for anyone to use, to access. And when we're developing resources, I almost want to say we take the show on the road. We disseminate the information at teacher workshops, whether we hold them here at Sandy Hook or we're at local, regional, or national conferences. We share what we have developed so that our purpose is to create an environmentally literate society, but also to support our educators and give them ready-made resources that they can take right to their classroom. Our teachers are so overstressed. And I'm focusing a lot more on teaching climate change to educators, because that's a great way to get the information out. But we do see close to 20,000 students a year here at Sandy Hook for our education programs. And through our work with partners like Columbia Climate School, the reach was even farther. So with regards to any lessons learned, I'm a big fan, and I hope a lot of you are too, when you're working with groups. You want to evaluate everything, so don't forget your program evaluations. But you have to really listen to your stakeholders. You have to listen to the people that you're working with. It's great if I come out here and say, hey, you know, I think you should do it like this. Doesn't work that way for everyone. Education isn't one size fits all. So you need to work with your stakeholders, surveys, emails, create networks, have conversations with them. You absolutely have to align your curricula with student learning standards. Otherwise, nobody's going to use anything that you developed for them. And when you're broadcasting resources that you might have to share, that's the hardest part. It is getting people to see what might be available. I mean, mass media, you know, if we could put a commercial up on Channel 7 and everybody in the New York area might see it, but we need to push things out through targeted emails, social media, flyers, talking to people. And so I think it's so important also to maintain your networks, because that's the best way to share practices and invite advice. So that's a lot in a nutshell, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Diana. I think definitely we can get a lot of lessons from you on what works, what doesn't work. And one very key thing which you mentioned is to listen to the community. I think all the panelists will agree to this on a very, you know, basic level. I think really something that we keep forgetting, but we need to bring back into our fold as we develop more environmental education programs. I'm, over to Mariam Rabi, my very close colleague working with us with the climate school for a couple of years now, and has really helped me to learn about climate storytelling in a much more, data oriented way, much more using maps and, aids that we could use. So I'll ask her to share about her work and also about how different people have used these tools that she has shared, and also how can maybe if you can give some country specific examples. I think that will really help us to understand the use of all these amazing tools. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you so much, Radhika. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and very exciting to learn about everyone's work. For those who aren't familiar with SDGs today, we're a data and GIS program at the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We were launched in partnership with Esri and National Geographic in mid-2020 at the High Level Political Forum. And our objective is to advance the use and production of timely and geospatial data for the SDGs. So we do a lot of work related to capacity development, training, data partnerships, working with different data providers to make data more accessible and usable. And so what I tried to do in this slide is provide a snapshot. I know it's a lot, but a snapshot of some of the work that we've done across different countries and with different stakeholder groups. So I've highlighted 3 of our main stakeholder groups, youth, universities, and local and national governments. One of the programs that we have the honor of collaborating with Radhika and the Center for Sustainable Development at the Climate School is the Eco Ambassador Solutions Lab. This has been an annual program that we've been running since 2021, and it is available to high school students. It's free of charge. It's a global program. And what we do through this program is combine training in geographic information systems with storytelling and climate education. So every year we pick a theme related to the SDGs, and we develop a curriculum, usually 8 to 10 weeks over the summer. And we ask students to then present data-driven solutions related to a sustainability challenge that they're facing in their local communities. It's one of the most exciting programs that I have the pleasure to be part of, because we learn a lot from the students and the amazing work that they do. And it's incredible to see what innovative solutions they come up with in only 2 months. Here I've highlighted 2 of the projects, one student from Japan and another student from the US, but we do have links to all of the final projects on our platform if you're interested in exploring their work. Another stakeholder group that we work with are universities. So we work with a lot of professors, researchers, and university students. So we have worked, for example, with a group of students in Egypt that were interested in aligning their final projects with the SDGs. So we had a couple of training sessions and provided guidance on how they could align their work with the SDGs, and they came up with incredible projects. We've also worked with professors on providing training in GIS so that they can incorporate GIS analysis in the research that they were doing related to different sustainability challenges. So again, here we have some examples of just a snapshot of some of the work that they've done in the US and in Malaysia. And the third kind of stakeholder group that I wanted to highlight are local and national governments. We've collaborated with various governments on a number of different initiatives, whether it was on developing or working on integrating non-traditional data sources into their SDG monitoring, or developing digital data-driven reports for voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. And also working on data and GIS-driven case studies. So here I've just provided a snapshot of some examples that we collaborated on with the government of Mombasa and Kenya through UN Habitat, where they were doing a lot of work on SDG 11 indicators. Another collaboration was with Hawaii Green Growth, where we supported them with their digital data-driven VLR. And the last screenshot is of a collaboration that we did with the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics to examine the impact of war on education and healthcare in Gaza. Again, I know that's a lot of information in one slide, but happy to answer any questions during the discussion. And I see that my colleague Steph has also been sharing some links to our work in the chat.
Thank you so much, Mariam. There are some questions that have come up, and please feel free to share all the links and suggestions. I can see a lot of connections being formed here, which is fantastic. Can we have Laura, if you can take the questions, Laura, and maybe the panelists can think about them and answer. Laura, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll just start chronologically. First question, what is the Columbia Climate School doing to expand climate change education and pre-service teacher preparation in schools of education in New York State? Mike Zam, Environmental Education Advisory Council and Climate Resilience Education Task Force. That's who's asking the question. I'll paste the question again in the chat. Sounds like this is directed towards the Columbia Climate School.
Thanks, Michael, for your question. I could start, but Radhika, feel free to jump in as well. You know, we are trying to work more closely with the New York City Public Schools and hoping to reach this pre-service teacher audience. I have not currently run programs specific to this audience, but I do believe some of our members of the Earth Network that are from Teachers College, they work more closely with this audience, but I can't speak too much to the specifics. Radhika, I'm not sure if you work with pre-service teachers.
We at the Center for Sustainable Development, I think our main focus has been working with UNESCO, and teachers connected with UNESCO are you know, people that we generally work with. We have this program called the Ages of Globalization. Mariam is a part of this program as well, and through this we've been able to reach a lot of teachers globally. And you know, teachers from Turkey, teachers from Greece, you know, a lot of people have shown interest, and then the teachers are bringing in their students as well. It's more about sustainable development, and it's more about a historical lens. It's you know, Anne has been there, and Nielsen from ASU has been also shaping this program up. Thanks, Anne, for for being here. And I think it's a great program to bring in different, we don't give prescriptions to any teacher, but they have this material and they are free to use this material and, take it forward. They have a lot of like maps and other things. So more tools and more ideas and frameworks than specific things that they can take from. And of course, we don't cater to any one country. So that's again a challenge or a benefit, because every country has their own learning standards. And so we are hoping that with this broad range of historical, political, institutional lens, we've been able to at least get some teachers who are using this for their own courses globally.
And I just also wanted to put someone on the spot. One of my colleagues here, Christina Torres, is on the call, is very active with the K through 12 teachers in New York City through Teachers College. And I don't know, Christina, if you want to take a second just to kind of share some of the great work that addresses that question there.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh, and hi, Radhika and everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to drop a link in the chat and I'll be very brief. With the Center for Sustainable Futures at Teachers College, Laurel mentioned our Midwinter Institute coming up, which we're so proud to be partnering with the Earth Networks, where we'll have 500 teachers across New York City public schools, cross-discipline, K-12, to really think critically about climate change. Over the summer, we do a more intensive summer institute with LEAP, which is Learning the Earth with AI and Physics, New York City Public Schools and us, to train teachers how to integrate climate cross-discipline. We started with elementary school, we did middle school. This upcoming summer, we have high school applications. And I'll put some links in the chat for you all to learn more. But I think it's really exciting to see when we think about the resources that we have in higher education, and not just access to climate scientists like our wonderful people at the Columbia Climate School, but also curriculum experts at Teachers College, and the work that Josh is doing, which is really kind of broadening the perspective of, impacts and disaster preparedness. I think we're uniquely positioned in higher education to think about how do we train the next generation of teachers. So thank you, Josh.
And I just wanted to mention one other resource. So the Earth Network, as it's a consortium of many different stakeholders across the school, we are working to develop a resource hub because we recognize that there's so many experts that have created curricula across the university, but it's kind of all housed in different places. So we're trying to create this hub so it's really easy for formal and informal educators to access, filter by the topic, the grade, and then they can either use this resource and cater it to their own needs, or some of the lessons we're hoping also could be more or less plug and play. So we're hoping that will come out in the next month or so, as you know, and I know there's a ton of resources out there for teachers, and it can almost be overwhelming. So to Diana's point, we're also hoping to share and roll out how some of these lessons would work in a classroom at the Midwinter Institute that Christina was sharing about.
Amazing. So our next question, it looks like Miriam, you answered it in the chat, but I was wondering if you wanted to expand on it further. The question is, Miriam, do you also help students to identify a sustainability challenge? If yes, how do you do it?
Thanks. That's a great question. So all of the projects are student-led. During the beginning, some of the first few sessions of the program, we asked students to share kind of a one-paragraph overview of what topics they're interested in or what they think they'll pursue over the summer program, and we review them and provide feedback via email. And then we also host virtual office hours where they can present their work, and we help them brainstorm and provide input into the ideas they have. But we're always really excited to hear about the student-led proposals and projects that they have every summer.
Amazing. It looks like those are all the questions that are in the chat, but if anyone has other questions, feel free to jump in, or you can put them in the chat.
Miriam, a quick follow-up on that one. Sounds great. It also, I was just wondering, it sounds high touch and kind of resource intensive. So I was just also wondering about scalability, or is the whole high touch model actually intentional?
I mean, I have to say that we do receive hundreds of applications a year, but sometimes we do have to limit it to about 100 participants, just given the capacity on our teams. I have a small team. I know Radhika's team is also usually overwhelmed with many projects as well. So given our capacity, we want to make sure that we can give students, enough time and attention, not only related to their projects, but we have a lot of technical and hands-on training as well. So we want to make sure that we can address all of the questions and challenges that they might face during the program. So we've been able to manage about 100 students per program, but we know there's a lot of interest, and Radhika and I are always planning to and hoping to scale up the program given the interest that we have seen from students, so that we can offer this program to more students across various countries.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have some great resources in the chat, but for this time being, does anybody have any further questions?
There is one comment from Anne who was mentioning that getting more states to talk about climate in the classroom is critical, but in some more conservative states, especially some that have more of like a scripted teacher delivery style of information, like what are some strategies that we can do, or what can we do to help support these teachers in teaching on climate and sustainability? Is agriculture maybe a way into that? And I just wanted to briefly comment, but also open it up to the other panelists. I definitely think that's a really important avenue to start talking about climate. We know that climate is impacting our food systems, but also our food systems have a huge role on climate as well. So it's kind of a twofold conversation there. But it's really critical to think about. And actually, at the climate school, there is a heavy focus on food systems, and not just the research that's being done by that group, but also it's being incorporated into our graduate programs as one of the tracks that students can take. Recognizing that our food systems have as much of as a global emission of like 1/3 of anthropogenic emissions. So it is really significant, really important to talk about. I did see one of our colleagues from that group was on the call. I'm not sure if Danny's still here, but Danny, if not to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to share a little bit about the work that you're doing with Just Banzo, and maybe some of the educational materials or communication strategies that your group is taking, like the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm a researcher and program manager at the climate school, and I'm part of a small group, I guess like a small team, but we actually work with a larger network, and what we focus on is sustainable food systems. So not just looking at policy and that have nutrition and health outcomes for different populations, but also try to put that in practice, have actual implementation projects it's in on site, so that we can test out, those interventions and see the results. So I came from a climate research institute previously, and so even just coming in and trying to tie more of that immediate near-term climate information that we have for the near future, and then start to support government and policymakers, embed that into decision making is really crucial, because I think what I've been told or what I've encountered is that people are kind of taken back by, these like kind of scary, big long-term changes related to climate change. But, how does it apply to your life now? How does it affect, what you do on a day-to-day basis? The near 5, 10 years, even just 6 months away. All of that has a lot of implications in every sector. In our food systems, we have a lot of food-related policy, agriculture-related policy, but very few policies actually look at the food systems as a whole. And when you talk about climate change, it's not only food systems are affected by climate change, it's also contributing to climate change. And, that's people livelihoods in a lot of ways, and also, the ability to have a healthy diet. So all that to say is that we want to aim at, contributing more of this kind of public facing resources. And so we started experimenting with a podcast. You can find our first series on food waste in New York City. And we're now working on a second series on, plant-based diet and plant-based alternative protein. So that's another way of just kind of engage people in conversations. How does it work to implement, an idea or a strategy within New York City? You get to hear from people that are working in organizations, people who are working at the Department of Sanitation. And I think that's very approachable for all ages, not just, adults, but I think for kids, it's kind of like starting to ask questions about the world around them and how do things work. So I know I'm rambling on, but I hope that gives you a bit of context. And yeah, we're trying to apply more of climate education into real world problems, like what NCDP, where Josh is based, is doing, what Radhika is doing. It's all of these work is happening. It's not just the far-fetched future. So I think it's really important that we also embed that message in education for K-12.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have a live question. Deepak, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. This is for Diana Burek. Thank you for a bunch of practical pointers and highlights. One of the things that you mentioned really caught my attention, which is to listen to stakeholders. And I do quite a bit of work as well, and I've worked quite a bit with students and educators. And one of the biggest challenges is to get people to go out and engage and talk, because we're not necessarily trained on how to do that. How do you establish a rapport, connection, communication channels? How do we ask questions? So I'm just curious, do you how do you do that? Do you do that at all? What kind of challenges do you face, and what kind of challenges have you seen, and what do you see works?
Thank you. That's a great question, Deepak. So basically, first of all, do you get out and talk? You do your best, right? Because if we all, I mean, a lot of us don't really have a whole lot of time to be able to get out and talk. So when I think about projects that we're working on or the work that we do, you do your best to pick venues that are going to be the most effective. So let's just say disseminating information that are going to really be the most effective with a lot of reach. But it also depends on your target audience. So if we're looking to Friday, we were just at the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Educators Conference. We did a workshop on climate change. And it seems it's what we're doing a lot of workshops on for educators. And now we're educating non-formal teachers at that aspect. We're present, we share material and information, provide hands-on for the educators, and then you have to make yourself available. So no offense to anybody here, but while we're all talking, and I'm paying attention to the chat because there's some wonderful people who want to connect, and I don't want to lose the opportunity to connect because we can help in some way. Developing networks, you can create a list from another list that works too, and maybe send out targeted emails, let's say. But I want to say, you know, if you're new in this, it takes a time to build relationships because, you know, a big part of education is all about relationships. It's building relationships with your colleagues, with the people that you're working with. So, um, I feel that it is really important to give the time to develop those conversations. If we are using something like a survey where we're looking to, uh, you know, we're working on something, you know, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. As I said, Sea Grant receives funds from NOAA. So we have about 4 years to do what we need to do in our strategic plan. I mean, it sounds all, you know, it's all business like, but it is part of the business, right? So it is part of education. You have a strategic plan, you have goals you need to meet, you have to do it in a certain period of time. So, so I think to be effective in the shortest period of time sometimes is then you're surveying people, stakeholders. So when I'm identifying stakeholders, if I'm looking to do some work with high school teachers, or if I'm looking to develop something for high school teachers, um, then I'm going to reach out to maybe the 2,000 teachers that I have in my database, because we've been doing education here for years, or I can get that information maybe from the state by looking at their curriculum developers or superintendents. We are currently a partner. Now in New Jersey, I mentioned earlier that teachers are required to teach climate change in school. And so the state mandated that in 2020, and teachers had to implement it in 2022, 2023. It's a great idea, but you know, no offense to the Department of Ed, but they really didn't prepare teachers. So now here we are going into 2025, and teachers are trying to catch up because they're trying to figure out how to incorporate climate change into their curriculum. So the state has has created climate change learning collaboratives here in New Jersey. So there are 4 institutions of higher learning, and they're working with community partners and nonprofits, including us, and we're providing training sessions for formal teachers, experiential learning. They're coming to us, we're going to them. So I think I'm getting a little off track on your question, but the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest factor in all of this is relationship building, to be able to hear what the people that you're working with, how can you help them? Because that's really what we're all here for. We're here to help them. We're here to help them, to educate them. Um, we're striving to create well-informed, I don't want to say create, to foster a well-informed public that can really make decisions and take action. And so our role as educators is to provide them with with that information. So, and I just think being available, really hearing what they're saying, and being able to find a way to meet their needs, whether it's financially or other resources. I hope that helped.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so
asking.
much. Thanks, Diana. Given that we have only 5 minutes left, maybe I just want to do like a quick round of last reflections from the panelists, maybe 1 minute each, to wrap up, just to wrap up the thinking so far, and leave that as a thought for our guests and other panelists. So maybe Laurel, you can start. Just 1 minute of wrapping up.
There's so many resources out there. I mean, I'm just going through the chat, and I'm really excited to connect with everyone and to, you know, leverage what's already out there. I think one of the things I'm seeing over and over here is this need and real desire to create this global community of various stakeholders that are all working toward the same goal of climate education to various audiences. So I'm trying to think about ways that we can do that I really encourage you all to consider joining our Earth Network. I think that could be a great start. Radhika also mentioned that we have global centers that might be global centers all over the world that might help to provide some more case-based and relevant climate information or contact or connection to where you are. But I think my last reflection is just, there has been a lot of climate anxiety, and especially given recent news in the new administration. And so I'm already talking to a lot of young people that are looking for more information, looking for ways that they can jumpstart projects on the ground, and they're also looking for hope. And so it is more critical than ever for all of us as educators to arm them with this information, and also to provide them the support and we also have to remember ourselves that while maybe federally we're moving away from a lot of the climate goals that we were trying to reach, on a local level, there's still a lot of progress that can be made. So I think we all, as climate educators and people that are trying to move the needle in the right direction ourselves, something to keep in mind and also to instill in the people that we work with and teach.
Thank you, Laurel. Maybe Diana can go next.
Thank you. Laurel was actually reading my mind because I'm jotting notes while Radhika was talking earlier. And I think with regard to the whole climate change topic, that I think I know eco anxiety is happening. You especially with kids, and so I think it's important to approach climate change education in a non-threatening way and to be able to provide hope, to encourage whomever you're talking to, that it's not doom and gloom, it's not the end of the world. It's that we can all work together to create solutions. I mean, children are so tech savvy these days. The minds are amazing. Just look at those eco ambassador story maps because they're fantastic. And I just wanted to refer back to an experience from last April when we had eco ambassadors in one of the researchers' labs. And I asked one of the students, how do you feel about finding, microplastics in food samples? And she said to me that, it's kind of sad, but I'm so excited to do something about it. And I think that's the message with climate change education that we need to impart on people, that we all have the intellect and the ability to work together and find solutions to help mitigate the issues that we face in the future. So that's the thing that keeps us going.
Hope. Thank you, Diana. Perfect way of ending, Josh.
Sure, I know we're right at time, and doing less than a minute for an academic is a very challenging thing, so I'm going to keep it very, very succinct. Essentially, I think just leaving with the message that what also happens in informal education is just as important as the formal education. Second to a climate scientist, the next trusted source is a friend, a family member. So these discussions that we're having are so critical around just what's going on, what's the effect. So if you find yourself on the rut, whether it's up against political barriers, organizational barriers, et cetera, talking about the effects, what people are experiencing, what they're noticing cross generations is extremely valuable at just at a bare minimum. So just thank you all very much for having me and then being part of this panel as well. I'll pass it to you, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Josh. And Mariam had to leave. Unfortunately, she has some travel emergencies coming up, but thank you all for attending. Thank you for your very engaging questions, and we would love to share this video with the rest of our network as well. And thank you, Laura, for asking the questions, moderating. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.